Be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. He said that fool, you weren't cool. He took a book to your school. Be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. Don't get shocked if you get mocked. It's what you find when you use your mind. Don't you sweat it, look 'em in the eye. Don't regret it, hold your head high. Be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. Try to show some tenderness, even when they're playing chess. You think it's dumb to be smart? But that's the way you make art, so be smart, dummy, dummy, be smart. Use your...
Hi, I'm James Eden. I live in the divided states of the United States, the divided states of America. I want to know how we can become united again. And unity does not mean uniformity. We don't have to dress alike, think alike, act alike. But we don't listen to each other as much as we used to, it seems to me. And we're always trying to change other people's minds. And we're not taught how to change our own. So this show is dedicated to bringing a guest on to change my mind about something. And we'll see how it goes. And today's show is about recovery. You know, when addiction is all over the United States, affecting countless families, and it's hard to think of families that haven't been affected one way or another. And so I brought a guest on today to help me talk about allow him to talk about how he got into recovery, what he's doing now, that sort of thing, and kind of like play off of my experiences with his, because my feeling is the gay community taught me that. I don't out anyone else, but I'm out. So that I'm an addict. You can see the book over my shoulder, Freedom, that I wrote about my story. And, I'm going to bring somebody on, but he's going to preserve his anonymity. And his name is Mark. And Mark, I'm going to bring you on stage now. Mark, you're on the air with me. And I hope that I just want to tell you that I'm really happy that you took the time to talk to me about your experiences. And can you hear me, Mark?
James, I can totally hear you, and I'm very happy to be here for you today and for your audience.
Yes, thank you, Mark. And so, what was the driving force that made you decide I need to get into recovery?
Well,
was there an incident? Was there or a certain time that you just said I need help?
What really kind of became clear to me was that I began to soberly assess, even though I wasn't sober at the time.
I get it. No pun intended.
Yeah, I began to really assess where I was in life, and when I started to notice that I was losing friends, when I was losing pleasure in doing things, when I was, hearing from those people in my immediate family that, hey, you have an alcohol problem. And I will say that I was very resistant to this message at first.
Of course. That's typical, I would say. Yeah.
And I will say that part of the reason why I was really resistant to this message was I grew up in a very alcoholic household.
I see.
And it is the case that, like, for instance, I remember my wife telling me, because at the time my children weren't really old enough to really articulate it, but my wife was the one telling me that she felt I had an alcohol problem. And I remember, and it must have been like a year or two where I would laugh it off, partially just because it's like, oh, lady, you don't know what alcoholism is.
Right. I'm not as bad as this guy, or that my.
Yeah, alcoholism is being yelled at and screamed at, and having the ever-present threat of violence. And I remember and the thing is, I was not guilty of any of those, which is the good news.
Right.
And actually, I did remember like looking at. I took those like Minnesota, questionnaires, the
Right.
assessments, self-evaluations. It's not the Minnesota multiphasics personality, but it's one of those.
Right. I'm familiar with the type of thing you're talking about. Right.
Yeah. And I remember it asking certain questions, and it would ask like, "Have you ever missed a day of work?" And I was like, "No, never." Have you ever been arrested? Never. So I was actually, by looking at that criterion, I was assessing myself and concluding, no, you're not an alcoholic. You don't have drug issues. Whereas now, as I look back, I think that maybe those questions allowed me to not look at other aspects of my life where I probably should have checked yes. Those are like the real obvious ones.
Right.
And I didn't qualify on those like major categories, like being arrested,
DUIs, that sort of thing.
And for the record, I did. Since then, I have missed work and I have been arrested. So I was able to check those on my way to seeking recovery.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because, I haven't done that. And we always say when someone says that, you haven't done that yet, because, those are the consequences that follow, but they don't necessarily have to occur before you can identify as an alcoholic or an addict of some sort. But it's very difficult if you don't check those boxes. How are you going to believe someone else telling you have a problem? And I can totally get in one that we don't want to hear it, for one. So there is a natural resistance to being told that. And two, you're not checking the boxes. But then as you go along and you start to go, oh gosh, and now I checked that box. Wow, now I'm checking that box too. Then that's the part where it started to sink in, and maybe I do have a problem with alcohol. Am I hearing that correctly?
You're reading it very well. And keep in mind, before I got my DUI, I was already had accepted the fact that I was an alcoholic.
Okay.
But it was really looking at the fact that, people don't necessarily want to hang out with me anymore. And whereas I never missed a day of work, my work relationships were getting a little cantankerous, shall we say.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to kind of see that. And in my own mind's eye, like I said earlier, I set up my own kind of criterion. Like I don't beat my kids.
Right.
So I don't threaten them. I don't threaten I'm not, because in my own personal life, my mother, and that's who we're really who is my main alcoholic in my life. She was, my household was very violent there for a while, and she sobered up. To be clear, and I was grateful she did, but it
doesn't change the experience that you had.
I was trying to see alcoholism through the eyes of a 12-year-old who is getting up in the middle of the night and arguing and trying to reason with a violent drunk who, and it wasn't always violent, but you know, when there's that kind of argument, there's always the threat is always there.
Right.
So there was, and I never like, you know, like when I was drinking, and my here in my house, for instance, in this living room, which you see the poster right there.
Right.
You know, like when I was here, if I was to, you know, I might like, you know, like go to sleep. You know, and I was thinking like, this is not a problem.
Yeah, you're not harming anyone else,
Yeah,
right?
I'm literally, I mean, I wasn't like nurturing my children the way I should have.
Right.
Wasn't attending to the relationship with my wife the way I should have.
Right.
I wasn't putting energy into my neighbors in my community or friendships the way I should have. And they slowly began to kind of dissipate away.
So you're talking to me, it sounds like you're talking about you may have been in denial, and then gradually your denial got chipped away, and then you accepted the fact that you have an alcohol problem. But what gets you to the point where I need help? I'm not clear yet on that. Help me understand that.
Yeah. Well, and very, very correct. I was in a massive amount of denial, which oddly enough, I think I kind of inherited from my mother, who got a double dose from her father, my grandfather. You know, I mean, it's strange how coping skills or coping mechanisms can be handed down. If they are, that's how it definitely worked. And I definitely was in some denial, but at a certain point, you know, I did assess the reality of, wow, I really have kind of like painted myself into a corner where I'm just this kind of alone, isolated kind of type.
Gotcha. Right.
And I do want to say, God, this is it's almost embarrassing to say, but my I do happen to have a condominium in San Francisco. I live, you know, in Menlo Park, but I have a condominium there. And I remember at one point, like my wife, who was aware that I was incredibly unhappy here, and she literally kind of suggested, like, hey, listen, why don't you live there during the week and come back on the weekends? You know, this way I could get my city life, and maybe that would reinvigorate me. Maybe it was not really so much alcoholism, but depression. And honestly,
very difficult to distinguish sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and keep in mind the two play on one another.
Of course.
And so the thing is I actually kind of moved up there during the week, and I would, and oddly enough, when I moved up there, I in addition to drinking alcohol, I started doing a lot of drugs, which were very readily available to me because of the proximity of my condo to where the drugs were.
Yep.
And oddly, and it was, you know, initially it's like felt great, but it kind of, I eventually kind of stopped even coming back on weekends.
Wow. Okay.
So this little notion of like a pied à terre, you know, you have like a city place and a country place. Well, it just kind of became like, I was just kind of there. And, you know, and and keep in mind, yes, I was doing drugs, but oftentimes, you know, these drugs, which were, you know, stimulant in nature, were kind of used to just keep me awake to drink more.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then like Saturday morning, I really couldn't uh, uh, drive down. I couldn't drive back down. You know, I just
So it
didn't.
wasn't a decision so much as the way that your life was turning out was your options were limited by the way you were living, in the sense that you know, I always say that I've got the power of choice restored to me, and even if you wanted to drive back, you were just too sick and tired to do it. Just-
Yeah, no, I mean, at least I always kind of sort of understood, like, dude, you're wrecked. Don't get in the car.
right.
Just do not do it. Keep in mind, I probably should have been pulled over 100 times before, but there are times when it's just like, dude, you're just that far out. Do not get in the car.
Right.
And you know, and it's so I began to kind of understand that. I think like one birthday, I spent by myself in my condominium, and I just remember feeling so sad. I couldn't drive. No one was going to come up and hang out with me.
Right.
And and I was just thinking, this is so sad. And is this really where I'm at? And I, that was kind of right before I did, through Kaiser, I did reach out and start their IOP program.
And IOP stands for
Intensive Outpatient Program.
Intensive Outpatient Program.
Yeah, and
Kaiser has them, and almost most medical facilities have some program like that, and so it's always available. But you had to reach out. No one was telling you.
Oh yeah, no. I knew I had a problem,
Right.
And it was, I reached out to them.
Good for you.
And conveniently, they had a program in San Francisco within walking distance of the condominium.
There you go. It's meant to be.
Yeah, it was summertime, so I was able to kind of. I'm a teacher, so
you had time off then. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had time off, and so. Yeah. And part of the reason why I don't necessarily want my face on this screen.
Of course, I understand.
Because I'm still. Somehow like children and addiction just shouldn't go in the same sentence.
Yeah, I totally get it, and most people want to preserve their anonymity for work-related reasons or what have you. You know, yes. I'm free of that concern myself, but I totally understand it. So that's very, very cool. So you basically were in walking distance of this IOP, and you took advantage of it. One, you reached out for it, and secondly, you took advantage of it. And then, did that help you? Did that make you turn a corner? How was that experience?
Let me say that it initially was pretty good. But I will say that I have a problem following rules. I do not like being given rules. And oddly enough, when I was at Kaiser IOP, and I didn't understand this, but you know, there was this kind of if you slipped. If you relapsed, you had to then you were pushed back in their recovery program. You weren't literally allowed to attend some IOP classes. And I totally didn't understand that. And what happened was I did relapse. So I did come clean. And I remember the person who was leading the group say, oh, well, when you relapse, you have to go back to, back to the beginning where you are, and it's just kind of like, and they kind of like assured me, well, you can stay around today, but going forward, you cannot attend these other relapse relapse classes or etc. So it was like, it's like, and at the time I had like 20 days clean. I felt really good about myself. I regret that I relapsed. Let's be clear.
And if I can, without prying too much, I know it's sensitive areas, but why do you think you relapsed? Was there a conscious decision, or was it just something that just happened, or how would you put it?
That would be kind of tough to say. I'm just going to say that, when I say that I've been trying to stay clean and sober, it's been a number of years at this point. I mean, I've relapsed like 13, 14 times. To be clear, and it's sometimes it's almost just like a reflex action. I don't know how to put it, but
Did you find yourself in the wrong environment, or did you put yourself in the environment that was wrong for you?
I was okay. Here's the deal: is I was the first time that we're talking about right now, the Kaiser experience
Right.
at I remember I was walking home, and literally there's a place where I could either turn left, go to the condo, or I could go straight ahead to where my drug dealer is.
Right.
And I was just feeling really good.
Wow.
And
yeah.
I just kind of thought, geez, what, and I,
What more could it do? I feel so good.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's
like, well, it's like this. It's like, I feel good. I want to feel better.
Gotcha.
You know what's going to feel better? Surprise. It's going to be, and I'm going to just say it like it is, crack. Okay? So it was going to feel better. It just was going to feel better.
I feel good, but I know I can feel better.
Yeah, exactly.
I totally relate to that.
And, unfortunately for me, I kind of like, I kind of did it as, it was almost like a one-off. And I kind of thought I was going back to rehab in the morning. I went to rehab, IOP in the morning. I literally walked in, I announced, I came clean. And I heard that message of like, no, you're going right back to the very beginning.
So now you feel like a failure? I'm putting words in your mouth, but that's how I would feel.
To say it was one, I felt like a failure, but it was partially also the way that it was delivered to me by the bureaucrat. And that's unfair to the counselor. But it's kind of like, this rule dictates that you go back to the beginning, and this apparently this wasn't very clear to me, because I kind of thought, okay, well, wait, I come clean, I'm honest, I continue on my path.
Right.
But it's and this is one of my problems with AA. Is that, if you relapse,
Alcoholics Anonymous, AA.
Alcoholics Anonymous, it's like the tradition is you reset your clock. You go back to the beginning. It's not like, in the past 5 years, the percentage of days you've been clean, is, whatever, 95%. What it is, oh, no, you go back to day one. And it's this kind of this, it's kind of rigidity of thinking, which sometimes I balk at. It's
understandable. And, I would say that, all those days of sobriety, they count. Whether or not they reset the clock on you, I think that those days of sobriety still help you going forward. And the resetting of the counter or whatever the rule is, that I don't know how to say this, it doesn't really tell the story, the whole story, because all those days that you put in, they were meaningful too.
See, yeah, and it's like it's a very the exercise of resetting the clock. It's almost it dismisses everything that you have done up to that point, and it's for the. I felt it was very self-defeating. It kind of seemed a little kind of cruel, frankly. It just kind of like, what the fuck? Seriously? Yeah. This is, and keep in mind, not everybody in AA feels that, but because some people.
But you did, and it's valid to feel that way because you felt that way.
Yeah, we had, I had in my home group, the woman who is the secretary, we had two secretaries, a male and a female. And the woman who was the secretary, she slipped, she came clean, and she asked, "Are you okay with me continuing as secretary?" She wanted to ask everybody in the group. And I was happy with my home group that everybody said yes. And part of the logic was, and it's an AA group, let's be clear.
Right.
But the logic that was used was, if you consider the number of days you were sober over the past 2 years, you can consider yourself 99.99% recovered. Just that, and she was very earnest. She was honest, and I will say I was proud to be part of that group at that time. I'm still part of that group. But it's not like every group or every person in AA looks at it that way.
Right. You're describing what I think of as a group conscience, and your group's conscience said,
"Yeah,
please continue on. We value you," and that was the message your group sent.
Absolutely. Yeah. No. And she was asking for that, and we, because she was in a position of leadership and of authority. And she was like, "Hey, my actions call into question my ability to be a leader. Do you still have faith in me?"
Right.
And I'm glad that everybody, like I said wholeheartedly, I have nothing but faith in you. And I'm happy that I did that.
Right.
Because I think we were talking earlier, like I recently changed AA sponsors. And keep in mind, my first sponsor is a great guy.
Right.
A great guy. I love him to death. And I will say this right here. The reason why I'll tell you why I like him and then why I had problems. Okay. But I liked him because I think he saw very early on in my recovery process that I had issues with people being in charge of me. or with authority. I have problems with authority
Yeah,
figures.
yeah.
I really do.
The only one. Yeah.
And oh, by the way, I forgot to ask right here is I don't know, is it permissible to swear on this show? You probably I would
prefer not but it's like if you got to do it, do it.
No, because here's the thing is I oftentimes and keep in mind, I'm sure your audience has already figured out that I have a case of ADD. Okay, but the thing is right here is my original sponsor could see early on that I have a problem with authority. And because, my first reaction is, you try to tell me to do something. My first reaction is usually like, no, I'm just going to say no.
Right.
So he understood that. And he didn't make a lot of demands on me. He was always there for me, encouraged me. And I will say this right here, whenever I relapsed or something like that, he was just very clear, like, hey, let's, no big deal, let's get back on the horse. And we would start by reading, the big book from page 1 again, so and he's very patient, but that's just the way he was taught. And right. That's how he did it.
Right.
And I will say, because like some sponsors and sponsees, because during AA shares, and I've been to many an AA meeting at this point, I'm sure you've been to many, sometimes people talk about the sponsor-sponsee relationship.
Right.
And sometimes I swear, and I'm just going to just say it the way I hear it, is like sometimes people, they get up there and they're proud of like, I was told what to do. I did what I had to do. I followed what this person did and blah, blah, blah. And I got it. And I read the book and then I blah, blah, blah. And I called my sponsor every day and I called 3 alcoholics and I read page 96 for 96 days in a row, whatever. They come up with this kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, that's really not for me. Because I'm not, when I hear that, I think I'm not a Labrador. I'm a human being. It's just, I don't want to be told what to do, essentially. And my first sponsor.
I love Labradors, by the way.
Huh? You're a fan of Labradors?
Yeah.
Well, that's great. As long as
they do need direction. That's for sure.
No, that's great for them. That's great for them.
And you could be happy for them that worked for them. But it doesn't. What works for them doesn't necessarily work for you. So you're on a journey to find what works for you.
Yes, exactly. And you know what? And I do not begrudge anybody who found sobriety by being a Labrador. Okay, if that's your approach and that works for you, God love you.
More power to you. Absolutely.
More power to you. You know what? I'm actually happy that it works for you.
Yes.
What I do know is it doesn't work for me. It just and I'm not saying like what, I'm like a cat or something like that,
or a different breed of dog. No, I know what you're saying. It's very true. You're just, you've got to be willing to listen and willing to take suggestions.
Yeah.
You have to find what resonates internally with you, because that's your truth. And if it doesn't resonate within me, then I'm saying, this isn't going to work, But you also have to give yourself time to let the toxins get out of your system, let your decision making improve a little bit, and the questions that I had when I was first trying to get started, and I had the same kind of reactions to authority. I don't think we're alone in that, but I also knew right away that certain things that they were saying just weren't going to work for me. And I had to find my own way. And that finding of my own way, that's really what I want to talk to you about, Mark. How did you get from, okay, I'm relapsing and I'm having trouble with this sponsor. How did you get the courage to say, well, this guy, as great as he is, and he's doing it the way he was taught, and this isn't going to work for me. I've got to figure out something else. And that, I think, is a remarkable decision on your part, to know that what this isn't working. And maybe it's me, but maybe it's just that I need something else. And how did you go about finding that something else? Did you think it was even out there? Or did you give into a sense of hopelessness? Oh, if this great guy can't do it for me, I might as well throw my hands up. Because I do hear that some people do that. And it's so sad, because there are other options out there.
You know, and I will say this about my first guy, the OG guy, is that when I would bring up, like, I told him I was interested in refuge recovery.
Yes, Refuge Recovery is a Buddhist-based recovery program, which I've attended. I'm also very proud to say that I enjoyed it and learned from it. And I think that it's definitely worth exploring. If not found, the Refuge Recovery and Recovery Dharma are both Buddhist-based recovery programs. But, how did you even? I didn't know it existed until somebody told me about it.
Actually, I will say this right here is the one benefit of my Kaiser IOP program. Was they because they mandated that you do outside groups,
right?
And they gave you a full list of like, for instance,
shout out to Kaiser.
Yeah, no, and it was like, so they there was refuge recovery, there was smart recovery, which is kind of like a cognitive behavioral therapy approach, not a Buddhist approach.
Right.
There was also an atheist group called Life Ring, which I never attended, although I'm an atheist.
I've heard of that. I have not attended either.
Yeah, and by the way, the reason,
I gotta check that out.
I'm going to say that the reason why I don't, why I'm probably not doing refuge recovery right this second, partially is just the fact that there are no in-person meetings here on the peninsula, which is where you and I both live.
My trouble too.
Yeah, there's. And I have no problem going to AA and to Refuge at the same time,
either,
or simultaneously. Also, the only like smart recovery that meets the closest one is like in Santa Clara. It's like, and it starts like at 7:30.
Right.
Whereas like AA. Let's be clear. There's one every hour of every day.
Yeah. You could always find a meeting.
You can find.
Shout out to AA for that. You could always find a meeting.
No. And I applaud AA for that. And you can find fellowship. You can find people.
Well, that you just struck a nerve with me, is because rather than the literature so much, it was the fellowship, it was the companionship, it was the kinship that I felt in this community of people. And I don't think that you and I think you will agree with me, it wasn't possible for me to do it alone. And I didn't think anyone else could help me. I didn't think anyone else could understand. And yet I found a community of people that did understand and could help me. And I listened to some of them say certain things, and it was like, wow, I had never thought of that. That's really helpful. So it wasn't so much the literature or the steps or whatever else. It was the community of people. And I think this is what I tell people. The most important thing is to find a community. And if it's in a church, a temple, a synagogue, I don't care. Find a community of people, of like-minded people that can help you and support you in your recovery, because it's work. It's hard. Getting sober, getting clean. That's hard work. There's no putting it. There's no easier, softer way of doing it. It's hard. And, you need support. You need companionship in order to make it. And that's the message that I try to deliver. And that is one of the strengths of AA. There were in-person meetings that you could go to. In Refuge Recovery, it was all, for me, it was all on Zoom. And that was the drawback at a certain point for me. And so I still attend. I did last Friday, for example, I did go to a Refuge Recovery meeting, and I could go to a Recovery Dharma meeting as well, but they were also only on Zoom. And if I want to see people, if I want to give a hug to somebody, I've got to do it in person. And
Oh, and I will say this right here is like AA talks about, like, there's the meeting before the meeting,
yes,
and the meeting after the meeting,
right.
In other words, like, there's a group which meets in a park literally 3 blocks from my house. And they started up during COVID because nobody could be indoors,
right?
So it was, which, by the way, I relapsed, of course, during COVID. I had 19 months. But I, after like gaining like COVID 19 pounds, I was just depressed.
15 for me. Yeah.
Okay. Well, good for you. But what happened was I
didn't mean to one up you there.
Yeah, no. It's all right. No,
that's a lot of weight to gain, but I did.
Recovery, sir. But so I go to this meeting in the park, which is just held outdoors by tradition at this point.
Yeah,
we can now be indoors, but it's you get there early. Even though I'm not like the best of friends with everybody there, at least, I do kind of like, there's a little chit chat before the meeting. Yeah. Then we start our regular routine.
And you're happy to see them. They're happy to see you. It's helpful. It helps.
Yeah. And this is one of those groups which, by the way, they end with the Lord's Prayer. Ooh. Which, as an atheist, I always chafe at it.
Yeah.
But you know what? I just don't say it. But I hold hands with 2 guys on either side of me, and I just kind of I do listen to it. I'm trying to embrace the spirit of accepting those that transgress against us, and not holding a resentment against people.
Right.
Okay. And so I like the message. But it's that whole, like, they start with whose father, know, and then everybody is our Father, whereas, of course, the thought coming through my mind is not mine,
right. Right.
But that's just my own issue.
Mine too. But I understand.
Yeah. But after the meeting, we kind of chit and chat with them. And I will say this right here is, for a long time there, 2 of those guys actually used to come back to my house here in this room where I sit with this poster.
Yep.
And we would, they would join. We had a Dungeons and Dragons group.
Uh-huh.
So, and it was, and so 3 of the people in the group of 6 were in AA in that same meeting on Sundays.
Oh.
The campaign ended, so we no longer are meeting right now. It's
yeah.
Well, it's a long story. I'm trying to get the group back together.
Yeah.
But it's but it was it's like when I was drinking, I wasn't playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
I wasn't taking pleasure in gardening. I wasn't like reading outside. Like I like reading histories and politics. But I wasn't like expanding my mind. I was reading short little articles, which is something that, my attention span, which is short enough already, but I would read keep up on the headlines as opposed to really getting into in-depth thinking, stuff that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, sure. I totally get that.
So I think in like sobriety, it's one thing I have found is that I am able to not just find community in those AA groups or in, I still go to Kaiser IOP. I also, I do want to say, I really like, I go to Adult Children of Alcoholics.
Okay.
I go to, and I go to 3 groups per week there. I go to as many of those as I do AA, frankly.
And I wanted to just say that I used to think adult children of alcoholics, well, if my parents weren't alcoholics, I didn't qualify, but it's the adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. So you can go there even if your parents weren't drunks.
Oh, 100%. And by the way, the like when you listen to people's shares, I know you and me, it's like, even if, like, when I hear about a person sharing and their parent was not an alcoholic but equally dysfunctional
Right.
as an alcoholic, I find commonality with that person.
Oh, absolutely. That's
Yeah. Oh no, and I will say this right here is, I want to give also a big shout. First of all, I love ACA.
Me too.
And because let me just say this right here. I'm going to just briefly say, I think ACA, you really peel back the onion on your life in that program. It's kind of eye-opening. It's like,
it was for me. I was remarkable. Yeah, I thought the first meeting I attended was remarkable, and the second one, and I've been going since November, so it's still brand new to me in many ways. But I have found the level of discovery has been intense, and I didn't think it was possible after all these years of sobriety and all these meetings that I have gone to, the Refuge, yoga and the 12 steps, recovery Dharma, AA, all of these things. I didn't think that was possible for me anymore, and it was definitely my experience.
And I do want to say, like, especially in ACA, like when we're there and we read our initial, like, what is the problem?
Right.
It talks about how, like, memories will come back.
Yes.
And it's like, and it's like, and I remember, like, and I've like talked to my relatives about things like, hey, do you remember this? And they would come back with, yeah. And you know what? I remember. And I'd be like, holy shit, that's right. That occurred. And it's kind of that stuff, which is like, wow, did I really block that out?
Right.
And it hits you like a lightning bolt.
Yes. That has been my experience.
And by the way, I'm going to give one more shout out to one of our AA sister programs, Al-Anon.
Yes, Al-Anon.
Because I want to say, and I've said this so many times in AA groups, I always give a shout out to Al-Anon, because if there was no Al-Anon, I probably wouldn't be married today. My wife would have kicked me to the curb because she was fed up with me.
Yes.
But she was, and the thing is, she really began to, through Al-Anon, began to see how this is a family disease. Right. And how it's because for her, a part of it was she actually, like a lot of the public, looks at alcoholism as a or drug addiction, however, whatever, as
right.
as a character issue.
Right.
And it was
that's the shaming in our society of all these types of things. If you have an eating disorder, then you're shamed because you're overweight. If you have a disease that's the symptoms are drug abuse or alcohol abuse or whatever it is. These are what the ACA and other programs like Al-Anon are teaching us, is that these are diseases rather than choices that we make, and these types of things have root cause. And once we get to the root cause, then we start to make progress in healing ourselves. And when we can do that, then the compulsion to behave in self-destructive as well as destructive to families, for example, loved ones, instead of acting like that, we can change and alter our behavior in a way that we are more loving and kind. And it's better for us, it's better for society. And so being supportive is much more helpful than being judgmental and putting people down for a lack of willpower. You know, you don't get to be a chess master without willpower. I had plenty of willpower. This is above and beyond willpower. So, you know, getting that message out, and I want to give a shout out to Al-Anon as well, because it is a family affair, addiction. And I don't know too many families that haven't experienced it in one way or another. And you're increasing your level of understanding, increases your ability to be compassionate. And that's what's needed, to be compassionate.
Very much so. No, and I will say this right here is that that shift in my wife from seeing it as like looking at me as like, you're just fucked up and fatally flawed and never will be that person I fell in love with.
Right.
She sees now that it's like, wow, something has like really happened here. There is inside me that person that she fell in love with.
Absolutely.
And
you can regain that person.
And to regain what it is, what the healing is in finding that person.
Yes.
And ultimately, you know, the thing is being angry, which she was, probably for good reasons.
Probably for good reasons, of course.
But the anger ultimately it eats away at her as well. It doesn't just, you know, it's like my anger, let's say at my mother, and trust me, there's a lot there. The thing is it's like
it's not hurting her, it's hurting Mark.
Yeah, that's right. Ultimately speaking, that's the truth. That is the truth. And I have not gotten to the point where I can completely forgive that woman. But I'm gonna say this right here is I actually, oddly enough, am working with a therapist who is, you want to talk about alternative routes to healing.
Mm-hmm.
Kaiser has, I don't know, begrudgingly or somehow they determined I needed a therapist. Like, and I'm like, dude, I've been asking for this for years. Okay. And so I got this guy, and they sent me a guy who's just a complete angel. I'm just going to say, yeah. And it's like, and this is how out of the box thinking this guy has. Is he used to work at a rehab in the San Francisco for basically Native Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, one thing you might want to consider is doing like a sweat lodge.
Wow.
And it's an experience. You're in this together.
Yeah.
We can do this together. I'm like, really? Kaiser is down for you doing it? And he's like, well, they're not really down for me doing it, but I think it would benefit you.
Uh-huh.
And so he's willing to do it. And he's like, here's one thing, because he diagnosed pretty quickly that I have some mommy issues, for instance. And so he wants to, we're going to build up my story. He's going to go through some hypnotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
And he will guide me through like a reading of a letter to her to get rid of this. And he said, and he's like, you could do this over the net, or we could do it in person, or we could do it. And my new AA guy,
uh-huh.
I'll get to him in one sec, but he was very quick. He was just like, Do it in person. Make sure he's with you. Make sure he's with you. Don't do that like all by yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm like, and I was, of course, there was no. I want to have this guy. We'll just call him Frank, with me, and then we would burn the letter together.
Yeah, that could be powerful.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like, I'm thinking, well, nothing else has necessarily worked.
Yeah.
And,
give it a shot. What harm could it do?
Yeah, I mean, it's like give it a shot, but also I really appreciate, like, the thing that I really like about this new therapist and my new AA guy. Okay, now I'm going to say the reason I left the old guy is because, frankly, because he just had a lot of things happening in his life. He just didn't have any time for me, and I don't begrudge him at all, because
no, of course not. But you got to take care of yourself too.
Yeah, because and let's be clear, the crap that he was going through is like some serious crap.
No,
so so it's not like I was like, hey buddy, give me more of your time, your limited time. It's like I was kind of like, well, okay, no wonder he's just really busy.
Right.
And so I don't begrudge him at all. In fact,
Mark, speaking of time, I'm running out of it.
Oh, so, shoot. Okay.
Yeah, we could go on for a long time, I think, you and I, but I would like to wrap up our time together by talking about the idea of getting over your denial and getting to acceptance that you did have a problem, and taking the responsibility for yourself to seek help. And the various things that you tried, some of them worked, some of them didn't, and you keep trying. And you had relapses, but you picked yourself up, dusted yourself off, and kept walking. And so I want to congratulate you for doing that. And a lot of the issues that we struggle with are putting ourselves down. Our own internal critics are very difficult. So every relapse must have been a serious challenge for you and your self-esteem. And so being able to keep going, and that's the thing. You just put your next foot forward, keep walking your path. And I think if there's one thing that that I haven't asked you, or that you want to make sure that you say, now's your time to say it before we have to end the program.
I want to say that, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show, number one. Number two, I want to say that since relapse is so prominent in my recovery, and here's the thing is that, I always beat myself up more so than anybody. Like, if I ever went back to an AA meeting, there really is no judgment.
Yeah, they're happy to see you.
Like they and people they because so many of them have relapsed, and many people share about their relapses. But the thing is it is just like, in ACA we talk about that critical parent.
Yes.
Like you, in other words, that's your internal voice, which is beating yourself up,
putting yourself down.
Yeah, for me, it's like, man, when I relapse, and let's keep in mind, at this particular point, I've only got it, like 3 months since my last one, and I'm just saying this, right? Don't anybody hold your breath. Just because I don't know. I am dour, but the fact of the matter is this right here: the person I know that beats me up the most is me. And
Mark, I'm going to give you a homework assignment, and that's to be compassionate towards yourself. You show compassion to others, show it to yourself, and silence that internal critic. Because that person your wife fell in love with, that person is still there. So I've got to wrap up now, Mark. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to take you backstage now and close the show. You did a great job. Thank you again. Bye.
Hey, always a pleasure.
Okay, that was Mark telling us about his experiences. But remember, you know, there's no change without change within, and it's inside ourselves where we begin. It's not our brains, it's not our hearts, it's deep inside where it starts. And remember,